Hey guys, Lex here again, and today we're playing the Druid in Path of Exile 2's latest update. Well, the last of the Druids. So, most of you know me from my Shield Warrior stuff, and at this point we all know that Fortifying Cry and Shield Wall is a very strong combo. I really liked using it last league, particularly against bosses. If you stack the right debuffs, you could blast down tier 4 pinnacles in like 1 or 2 setups, so I figure, hey, let's see what we can do with a Shield Wall Druid. Some of you might ask, why Shield Druid? What about all the animal forms and plant shenanigans you can get into? Well, I'll tell you. For one, I mean, shield skills are all I know, to be honest. But also, there are some pretty interesting nodes on the Druid side of the passive skill tree that allow for some pretty big damage boosts to both physical and spell damage at the same time, alongside some really big bonuses to the rage mechanic as well. And being the warrior-coded player that I am, I wanted to see if I could make a tanky shield druid caster hybrid work, especially since active block effects are so strong for survivability in this game. So after a lot of experimenting, I'm finally pushing the endgame here with this very affordable lightning-infused shield druid that's been dealing tons of damage in both melee and ranged. This is actually a true hybrid build in my opinion that is half caster and half melee. Honestly, it feels like we're playing a version of Spark Sorcerer that can beat the hell out of things up close, though I will say that if you're looking for a one-button build, this ain't it. You get a lot of damage boosts by weaving in and alternating both melee and spells together like a battle mage, so this is a pretty active playstyle for those of you looking for that. And one last thing, even if you end up not digging this build overall, I take deep dives on certain mechanics that I experiment with, as you've seen with my warrior stuff, and you'll likely learn something from the video even still. Things like moment of vulnerability mechanics, thunderstorm mechanics, and interactions with Choir of the Storm, and how to perform a standing bear slam straight from caster form. A lot of people think you need to roar or swipe first, but nope, you don't need to do that at all. But anyways, that's enough of an intro. Let's get into the build. This is definitely a budget build that isn't very expensive to put together at all, so hopefully the economy isn't too nuked from the Fub Gun Temple running strat or whatever. But before I get into the gear and late game stuff, by popular request, I will real quickly go over what I did leveling, what I learned from it druid mechanics wise, and move on to the current endgame build and how it works, as well as the skill gems and support gems and gear and all of that fun stuff. Let's get into it. Alright, I'm going to be honest, Druid at first felt a little clunky to me and ironically not as tanky as I thought he would be, even as a bear. During the earliest moments of the playthrough, I kid you not, I mostly played as a shield warrior of all things, using mace skills, clearing with bone shatter, etc. However, at a certain point I found that the bear slam was actually a pretty decent damage dealer, and as strong as mace strike is DPS wise, the bear swipe was actually a lot stronger assuming you had a decent talisman for your level, so it was kind of cool that already there were some upgrades there compared to your standard shield warrior. Was basically using a mix of bone shatter and bear slams for clearing Act 1, and lots of bear swiping for single target DPS when bosses were heavy stunned. Act 2 was mostly the same until you get shield wall, which is obviously such a game changer. Assuming you had a decent shield, this became the main boss killer as it historically was, but this time around I was actually using bear slams to combo with it as it did tons of damage, especially if you grab the right passive skill tree nodes in the druid starting area. Overall, I used this boss killing combo all the way up until Act 4. It often hit harder than Fortifying Cry, which was crazy, but I actually started using both at a certain point. One quick note here, as I mentioned earlier, you can actually cast the bear slam from standing and in caster form if you are completely still when you use it. I know some people think you have to bear swipe or roar before you can slam to reduce the animation time, but if you are, once again, standing completely still in caster form, you'll get the faster, already standing up version of Furious Slam. Something to keep in mind, and it helped with this combo as I progressed through the campaign. I also ended up going with Moment of Vulnerability from the Oracle Ascendancy as my first 2 points, and this is, I'd say, quite situational, but again, very useful for nuking down bosses in the campaign if they were primed for stun. I'd use it as they were primed from spamming shield charges socketed with brink and stun, and then once the image appears, you basically pull off the shield wall combo as quickly as you can so you hit both the boss and the image for crazy damage, and I was honestly able to skip some boss fights outright that way during the campaign. However, it's a little unreliable for a couple reasons. One is that the image can appear 2 miles away with no chance of hitting it and the boss at the same time. I'm not sure if this was something I had control over or if it was random, but either way it seems like it'd be hard to manage super precisely in a boss fight. Also, for a skill like Shield Wall, you have to place it pretty specifically in order to hit both at the same time. This is definitely within your control, but takes a bit of practice to get right, but it is possible. But yeah, essentially using that combo on bosses worked all the way through the interludes, as well as mixing in Bone Shatters and Bear Slams out in the field for clearing. was honestly a super smooth campaign experience, and I really enjoyed leveling as a Druid. And that's pretty much how the campaign went overall, guys. I'll have a Mobalytics link in the description box for snapshots of what my build and gear look like progressing through the various acts. But for now, let's move on to what I've been experimenting with in the endgame, because it's kind of weird but also very strong, as you have both a legit melee option as well as a range clear in this one build, and it feels nice to be able to switch between the two on a whim. Traditionally, my shield warrior builds have always been strong with pinnacle boss killing, but a bit whatever as far as like the clearing goes. But for Druid, we still have that pinnacle boss killing potential, and what I've put together helps with clearing quite a lot. So this has been an interesting journey, I'll be honest. There has been a lot of clunk involved. First, it felt like I was not dealing enough damage, and then I was dealing enough damage but not tanky enough. I even switched back to Bear Druid again with the shield wall combo, but that didn't feel right either. Damage suffered somehow with all of that, but now I have to say it feels like the build is in a great spot. It works like this. This is a true caster melee hybrid build where honestly most of our efficient clear is using lightning spells with a wand and focus, like Sparks and Thunderstorm to proc some very strong support gems, alongside Choir of the Storm, a cheap but strong unique necklace that was slightly buffed in the most recent patch. The clear has felt very good and we're not too squishy, so if you happen to get caught out and smacked while spamming spells without your shield, it's not the end of the world since we're both an armored and energy shielded caster. That said, if you do find yourself getting swarmed, Resonating Shield and Fortifying Cry are here to save the day. Resonating on itself deals a pretty good chunk of damage, but with Fortifying Cry, you can clear up any rabble that happens to jump on you, and you can often just blast down a rare on its own. They are legit melee options that allow you to go toe-to-toe with an enemy that may be up in your, area. For mapping, I find myself spending most of my time using the caster set since I am using Eternal Rage set to that weapon set specifically. This lets me build up to max rage, and we are getting a bunch of spell damage and armor bonuses from each rage stack. However, this build encourages you to truly mix up the melee and magic to get the most out of your damage, and after a bit of practice it feels pretty smooth just coasting through maps. It's also really nice to be able to just hang back during a sticky situation and spam sparks from a range, not gonna lie, especially with those abyss rares. But yes, as you'll see with how our passive skill tree is set up, rage is very important to this build and you want to be maintaining it as best as you can for maximum damage and tankiness. I think it should be said here as well, but Thunderstorm is probably one of the best skills in the game right now, and I cast this very often to apply shock, but also deal some good damage to packs before I even engage them. Not only that, but being a storm skill, it also isn't blocked by walls like many spells are. You can literally cast this spell through walls and doors on unsuspecting mobs to deal some easy damage or outright wipe them if you want. It also seems to have no range limitation. You can literally cast this at the edge of your screen and it'll go there, while something like Orb of Storms has a set range, so that's also a nice bonus. But yeah, I'm casting this all the time, usually before I shield charge in and start bashing things, or I'll just spam sparks to obliterate things in the storm from a range. It feels like you have a lot of freedom with how you want to engage with clearing on this build. Bosses are where Shield Wall comes in since it's our heaviest hitting combo when paired with Fortifying Cry. However, we actually don't need to detonate the wall with the War Shout itself, since the empowered shield waves are banked as soon as you shout. Basically, I build up rage by standing there in my caster set, letting Eternal Rage do its thing. Then once the fight starts, if it's just a map boss, I'll cast Thunderstorm, shield charge spam until it is heavy stunned, cast another Thunderstorm, and Fortifying Cry shield wall combo it down. Sometimes you do so much damage you may not even need to shield wall. You can just Fortifying Cry and Resonating Shield the guy down. They can hit crazy hard with this build. If it's a pinnacle boss, I may take more time to build up Uruk's smelting stacks, which we'll go over in a bit, but once those are built up, pretty much the same story. Shield charge until heavy stunned, Thunderstorm, and then shout and wall, shout and wall, shout and wall. Truth be told, I'm still progressing towards Uber Arbiter and some of the other higher end stuff, but the tier 4 pinnacles I have access to are dropping super fast. And those are the basics of how it plays, guys. There's still a bit of optimizing I'd like to do with this guy when it comes to like cranking up shock magnitude and figuring out how to get my crit to crit damage bonus ratio to be more ideal for physical attacks. But for now, let's go over the support gems that'll give us some more insight onto how this all works. Alright, so in the essence of time, I'm going to mouse over each support gem while talking about each skill, but I'll go over any specific supports if they need some explanation, so let's get to it. Alright, so next up is Galvanic Field for my wand. This is mostly optional, but I do use it to help clear. It basically gives you a buff that will attach an orb to the thing that you next shock that deals like AoE lightning damage over time periodically. So I'll often just cast this while I'm running around a map before my next thunderstorm, or right on top of an abyss crag, a thunderstorm when the enemy starts start pouring out. Does some decent damage, honestly, but again, mostly optional if you want to run with some other wand or staff, to be honest. Next, the triggered lightning bolt from the Choir of the Storm unique amulet, which we'll talk about in the gear section of this video. But yeah, this has been dealing a ton of damage, and I currently have it socketed in a way to assist with clearing. However, for pinnacles, I socket this with exploit weakness instead of spell cascade to remove armor. This lets us build up those Uruk smelting stacks fairly quickly, and I also socket concussive spells in here instead of cooldown recovery, so that we can build up stun with our shield charges that much more quickly, since the boss will basically be perma-dazed from these triggered casts. Thunderstorm is next, our star player. This is basically socketed in a way to help with clear, but also to ensure that we always shock whatever the spell hits due to shock conduction 2. All drenched targets are now shocked when casting this, and the spell also drenches targets. It's such an easy way to inflict shock, and I honestly think GGG might change this spell in the next update. It's a little too easy. Static shocks, electromagnetism, and coursing current are all useful for clearing and dealing damage and pulling mobs close together, all triggering when shocking targets, which we are once again ensuring with this one ability with shock conduction 2. Very powerful combination of support gems here on this skill. One last support gem swap here. I swap out Overabundance and Coursing Current with Overcharge and Commiserate on boss fights. This just makes our thunderstorms inflict a stronger magnitude of shock, which will make all of our damage hit harder. And I think it's around 56% shock magnitude instead of 42% at the moment if you use it this way. And you don't have to worry about the shock being inflicted on yourself from Overcharge, since Thunderstorm is continuous and is constantly peeling it back off of you with Commiserate. And shield charges here, socketed in a way to increase its stun build up, reduce its animation time, and for some endurance charge generation. Practical Magic 2 is also a very strong support gem, as we gain 40% increased spell damage for 8 seconds when heavy stunning an enemy, which is very easy to pull off both in maps and in boss fights, so definitely very useful to our build. And our melee attacks also benefit from this buff, as you'll see in a bit. I mean, if you've been looking at my character, you can probably guess how that works, but yeah, use this to travel across maps, initiate on packs, stun things, etc. I still need to unlock that 5th socket actually, which I may socket in like another damage gem or some other utility thing. Still haven't decided. Shield Wall, same as ever, just socketed to crank up its damage. Currently its crit to crit damage bonus ratio isn't ideal for me. That's something I'd like to improve with some other items and on the passive skill tree, but for now it's been hitting pretty good, so that's how these sockets are going to be for a minute. And I do like that Druid has so much access to skill speed on its side of the passive skill tree, so you have these different ways you can reduce this animation time and get them down quicker. But yeah, this has been hitting pretty hard overall. And I'll even whip this out against some stubborn rares sometimes if I've just heavy stunned them, just to delete them a little quicker. Fortifying Cry is also socketed for damage, but also a little bit of AoE, especially for that overlapping effect on the shield wall when you are nuking bosses down with that combo. But currently I feel like I am comfortable enough with my endurance charge generation to bypass the cooldown, though earlier on I was using Enraged Warcry, which lets you use 15 rage to bypass the cooldown instead of endurance charges. It may be more useful in bosses as well to use Enraged Warcry, because you can use this ability a little bit more easily back to back, as we are stacking up critical weakness every time we use this ability due to our passive skill tree. So Enraged Warcry might still have a place here, but I currently haven't seen a need for it with how hard that my combo has been hitting. However, earlier on, if you want to stack up more critical weakness, which is just basically critical strike chance for your melee stuff, it may make more sense to go with Enraged Warcry. Just remember, with this build you want to shout first and then shield wall after, or else the shield wall may get destroyed by a thunderstorm or something before you can detonate it with the shout. So just remember that. Resonating Shield is next, socketed in a way to help us avoid getting heavy stunned and to break increased armor. We've already talked about this, but Uruk Smelting will help us deal more physical damage each time we fully break armor, so an extra 5% for each time we fully break a target's armor over and over again, and that's permanent throughout the course of a boss fight, unless they have like a phase transition, which I don't think should be the case. All those stacks disappear and you have to build them back up again. But that aside, we loop breaking armor with this skill, and the lightning bolt triggered from the Choir of the Storm's amulet, socketed with exploit weakness to remove it over and over until we get a boss up to 20% increased physical damage if you want. But aside from that, this is actually a pretty decent clearing ability, especially if you use Fortifying Cry in between resonating shield ticks, because you are active blocking as you are channeling the skill. So whatever direction you're facing, as long as you are keeping an eye on your stun threshold, you're pretty much immune to hit damage. So as long as you're not getting heavy stunned, you can just keep blocking all attacks, all hit attacks from a certain direction as you are clearing. So that can feel kind of good and safe. This support gem here, though, definitely demands a shout out. Deadly Resolve. This has been hitting really hard, even on my build that's not stacking a crazy amount of armor. I highly recommend this to anyone using channeling skills and has even a little bit of armor to just try this one out. It's been hitting really hard, and you can see by the tooltip that it'll scale its damage based on your armor, 1% per 108 armor up to 200%. So I think that's a little over 20k armor for the maximum value out of this, and I have nowhere near that amount, and I'm finding it very useful. Again, try this new support gem out. It feels good and does really good damage. Highly recommend. Sparks is pretty straightforward, socketed in a way to assist with damage and clearing. This is our main clearing skill at a range, but again, it's just so efficient for clear, especially in the Vol Temple if you've been running that league mechanic. And yeah, I'll be honest, compared to my warrior builds that tend to focus on boss killing damage, this spell single-handedly makes this build better for mapping and group clearing, straight up. It triggers those Choir of the Storm lightning bolts like crazy. Super basic, but super awesome ability. Been loving it. Just be sure to switch to the shield if you're getting hit in a sticky situation. All right, spirit gems. First up is Eternal Rage with no sockets. It has a heavy spirit cost at 100, so we are rolling with this in weapon set 2 only, and that lets us build up rage passively. Here, it's actually not active. Let's switch to weapon set 2. As you can see, it is now active, and now you can see down here we're building up rage in our little rage bar. I mean, pretty straightforward, honestly. If spirit stacking is a bit outside your budget, I would recommend not running this and just rolling with Berserk and Scavenge Plating instead, as you build up rage the old-fashioned way with rage 3 on things like Resonating Shield and Shield Charge. But I highly recommend this one, and you should prioritize being able to use this, in my opinion. It felt like a game changer once I slapped this one on. Which brings us to Berserk. This gives us a bigger damage boost from rage, significantly so. Definitely want this one here. However, only when you can manage it with enough life regen, since it'll be draining that 0.1% of your life most of the time with this build. But honestly, that's not even that hard to cancel out. Scavenge Plating is pretty straightforward. We're breaking armor with Resonating Shield, so we get a good benefit from this one. And since this is set to weapon set 1, we free up 100 spirit every time we switch to our melee set, so we can socket it with, you know, useful spirit support gems here, which will help with our survivability. As far as an alternative might go, yes, obviously a big one is Cast on Critical. If you wanted to go that route and maybe go full on meta with Comets or something, sure. I mean, you could do that, but it would feel like too much of a different build at that point, in my opinion. And I like where our single target damage is coming from, which is the Shield Wall Fortifying Cry combo. I was using Cast on Crit with Arc and Scion's Temper for a minute, and that felt kind of nice, but overall, I just like the way this has been playing more. But yeah, those were the skill gems, guys. Hopefully those explanations suffice, but please leave any comments if you have more questions about my choices here. But for now, we're moving on to the passive skill tree. All right, everyone, let's talk about the passive skill tree, of which I have spent countless gold experimenting and respecing in, but it's finally in a place that I am mostly happy with, though I am still playing around with a few things. As a quick note, I will not be going over the campaign leveling passive skill trees in this video, because that will add 2 years onto the runtime here. But again, I do have snapshots of what the passive skill tree looked like in each act in the Mobalytics link down below, so please check that out and leave a comment if you have any questions about them. But with that said, let's get into it. So basically, I knew from the start that I wanted to pursue some kind of caster melee hybrid with how this tree looked, and I'm glad there is one that's possible. Starting with the Ascendancy, I had the Converging Paths branch here as my first 2 points, which I think is correct, honestly. Especially going through the campaign, you will nuke bosses down so much faster with that moment of vulnerability. But for your second 2, I honestly think pursuing the Unseen Path makes more sense here. There are some very easily accessible damage nodes and rage nodes along this branch here that show up even as you are leveling through the campaign. I initially thought that this was going to be a late endgame thing only, but I was wrong. This is pretty good as your 3rd and 4th Ascendancy points. 5th and 6th Ascendancy points went the lesser harm here. It just makes you a bit tankier, making the enemy damage and enemy crit chance unlucky on you. And around now is when you want to start thinking about stacking critical strike stuff on your gear and passive skill tree in preparation for forced outcome, which is inevitable critical hits. So most of you know how this works by now, but basically this will make all of your hits critical strikes by re-rolling the strike until it critical hits, while suffering a minus 30% critical damage bonus penalty each reroll. So the higher your crit chances, the less rerolls you will have to perform before you get a successful crit. And they will therefore hit harder in that sense. You basically want to make sure that you're stacking both critical hit chance and critical damage bonus. However, I think I need to give credit here to this Redditor OKPick1772. This person made such a good breakdown of like what the ideal crit chance to crit bonus damage ratios are, complete with graphs and heat maps and everything. So big shout out to the work you put into this one. I'm actually going to link the Reddit post in the description if you guys want to take a look at it. But the TLDR version is this. Basically, you want around 25% base crit chance, give or take, and around 500% critical damage bonus. Again, this doesn't have to be exact, just kind of around those numbers would be good. But these are one of the more ideal ratios you can have to get the most out of this Ascendancy node. And if you are able to achieve this ratio, the 25% crit chance and 500% damage bonus, at that point, you wouldn't want to stack more crit chance at all, essentially, with upgrades you get. Basically, you just want to stack as much crit damage bonus as possible. I'm pretty sure I'm right here, but you guys can let me know what you think. If you aren't able to get to one of those ideal ratios, you may want to put inevitable crits on the back burner until you can get closer to them. And in that meantime, you can go with, entwined realities by specking out of converging paths at this point. I didn't think this node was going to be that useful at first, but it kind of proved me wrong again with all these useful notables I am able to grab around here, for instance, and around here without having to spend a bunch of passive points getting to them. Really useful Ascendancy node, to be honest, and definitely speaks to the min-maxer inside of me. But anyways, let's go over the tree here. This does take a little bit of respecking as we renounce bear form from the campaign and early maps, but honestly not even that much since we are still traveling along the two main branches here as I was in the campaign. So firstly, since we are Zealot's Oath, our energy shield does not recharge. It is constantly regenerating based off of our life regen, which is why we take these nodes here. Tiny bit of damage, but some decent regen here. Stun threshold nodes here, which I didn't want to take, but felt kind of necessary with how my stun buildup was suffering in maps, and the 10% increased defenses ain't so bad on the notable here. This cluster down here is very useful, armor and energy shield, but this notable gives us +3 armor per 1 item energy shield on equipped boots, which is honestly amazing. Huge armor boost here with the right pair of boots, whether they are pure energy shield or some chunky armor and energy shield hybrid boots. Definitely worth it. Grab this if you are going armor and energy shield. Down here are two very strong critical hit chance and critical damage bonus branches with +10 strength on each end. Very useful to the build, and we don't even care about the reduced maximum mana because we're blood magic. Feels good. Somewhat related, crazy good critical hit and bonus branch here. This is an Oracle only branch, so definitely take advantage of this one. And as I said before, we are blood magic, so we are able to grab these very useful notables all around the keystone here without having to path to any of them. Honestly, such a juicy node for this build. Yep, and on the left, we're grabbing this lightning bolt boy caster set for the lightning stuff below and melee set with the physical stuff above. So weapon set 2 and weapon set 1, obviously. Pretty straightforward. The notable allowing us to gain 18% of physical damage as lightning is great, and that gained damage will scale a bit with any lightning damage boosts that we have on the tree or on our gear. All right, let's go back to the main branch here. We grab these 3 nodes since they are point for point pretty good health regen nodes and will help with our health and energy shield regen. And over here we have a bunch of strength and spell damage nodes, with this notable giving us 2% increased spell damage per 10 strength. Pretty good if you are obviously stacking some strength, which I have been a bit on this build, though you definitely want to grab a good bit of intelligence too, so I'm not going like all in on strength or anything. Projectile stuff for weapon set 2, obviously for sparks, and we have this little branch here, lots of maximum rage nodes, especially the notable here, but makes your rage loss happen a lot sooner than it normally would, so maintaining rage stacks becomes a bit harder. But we have Eternal Rage, so we don't really need to worry about that. And the great benefit of this is having the +15 more stacks in one passive skill tree point, so it's very worth it. Though we obviously have ways to maintain rage outside of weapon set 2, because Eternal Rage is set only to weapon set 2, so this branch here is an example, which is set to weapon set 1. We get some damage, some rage on hit, and as we're getting rage on hit, we are denying it from decaying, but also 10 rage grants 12% increased physical damage, or every 10 rage grants that. And with our new maximum being around 51 instead of 30, we're getting an extra 24% increased physical damage out of this when maxed out, for a total of 60% 60% overall. You know, with the previous max of 30, you're only getting 36. So a total of 60% increased physical damage. Pretty worth it, honestly. I think grabbing Reinforced Barrier here is pretty good if you're stacking armor in any way. I'm pretty sure this means that you are getting 20% more armor out of your total armor value while you are not on low energy shield. I'm pretty sure that's the case here, but someone might double check that for me. I haven't looked this one up. And I mean, if I had the points, I'd probably go for Spiral into Depression anyway back here, which is really good, especially for the move speed boost. Down below, some weapon set 1 stuff. My melee needs all the help it can with crit chance, so that's why I grabbed this branch here. And then this one conveniently connected to it, which gives us Warcry speed, very useful, into Howling Beast, which inflicts 3 stacks of critical weakness on enemies, and that is a straight 0.5% crit chance per stack. So every time you shout, you are increasing your crit chance on the targets you hit with that shout by 1.5% each time you use it. I'm pretty sure that's how that works, and you can stack it multiple times, so I will sometimes shout twice in a boss fight before shield walling if I'm using Enraged Warcry. I still need to do a little bit more testing there because I'm using endurance charges now, so I think it makes more sense to just, you know, wall Warcry, but it kind of depends on their heavy stun animation anyway in those scenarios. So basically you're just getting a better crit ratio bonus from this every time you use Fortifying Cry, essentially. Zealot's Oath is here, which we've talked about, and we have these useful notables all around here: crit damage bonus and reduced enemy crit damage bonus, as well as enhancing attacks and emboldening casts. Enhancing attacks gives us 12% more spell damage for each different non-instant attack we've used in the past 8 seconds, while emboldening casts gives us 12% increased attack damage for each different non-instant spell we've used in the past 8 seconds. Not too bad if you're using, you know, the full kit on this build reasonably often. We're getting 36% spell damage and 72% attack damage. Why that much attack damage? You'll see why when we go over the gear. Mystical Rage is here, giving us 2% increased spell damage per rage. Amazing notable passive, and I mean, screw it, there's really no point in hiding it anymore, to be honest. This is applying to our attacks thanks to the Crown of Eyes unique helmet, which makes all spell damage increases apply to attacks as well. So this is also giving us more value to our shield skills from rage, and that explains the previous notable I went over, and this makes that spell damage from strength node we talked about earlier even more useful. So yeah, spell damage is great on this build, and you can see now why rage is so important to this build, you know, because we were getting, you know, the 2% per rage stack spell damage bonus. We're getting 12% for every 10 rage stacks on that other notable passive. We're getting armor, 1% per rage stack increased armor from that other notable down below. Just all sorts of stuff with rage is just giving us so much benefit. That's why you should really run Eternal Rage if you want to feel like you're running this build at full power. But yeah, aside from that, grabbing keystones where I can for more damage boosts here and there without having to spend the passive skill points traveling to them until we hit Mind Over Matter. And this is a keystone much like this one over here, where we aren't interested in its effect, but rather the radius it grants us for these strong nodes here. Breaking Point is set to the caster set for elemental ailment duration and magnitude. It just makes our shock magnitude higher and therefore increases all of our damage by a little bit. But over here are the more interesting nodes. First, we have 10% chance between these two nodes to gain Arcane Surge every time we crit, which is all of our hits at this point. And then the Touch of the Arcane node for 40% increased effect of Arcane Surge on us. So what does Arcane Surge do? Normally it gives us 20% more mana regen rate and 15% more cast speed. However, thanks to this notable over here, we are actually converting the mana regen from Arcane Surge to life regen. So this is helping us regen our life and energy shield even more when it is active, on top of the useful 1% maximum life regen here. All right, last bit I'm going to go over. I have a From Nothing diamond here that lets me allocate passives in a small radius of resonance over here. So disclaimer here, this diamond is pretty pricey. Last I checked it was like 5 divs, but it's kind of worth it because these are, in my opinion, some of the most useful critical hit chance and critical bonus damage nodes in the whole tree. So this is likely going to be a pricey purchase that may not be worth it right off the bat. Again, I wasn't using this for quite a while and was just going off of the crit stuff that was more local, but once you have spent a few divs on your gear and are looking to crank up your crit to crit damage ratio, I'd start looking into one of these because these nodes are just so useful. As well as the two I grabbed here, Stylebender for more armor break on targets with ailments, 10 strength, 25% fizz damage in one node, amazing. And then down here we have Spellblade, 32% increased spell damage while wielding a melee weapon. This obviously is now also attack damage due to that unique helmet, and another 10 dex to boot. Some great nodes around here honestly, which is why that From Nothing diamond is so pricey. Last thing to go over are gems. Basically I think you should go for crit chance and gain stun threshold equal to maximum energy shield where you can. Obviously 15% max rolls for both are going to run up the price, so just look up some more lower rolls of each if you don't quite have the currency for those yet. But you know, some ailment magnitude or even AoE wouldn't be bad alongside these either, as well as some spell damage obviously. And that is the passive skill tree, y'all. Thank you for bearing with me, but again, leave any questions in the comments if you are curious about this one and I'll get back to you best I can. And be sure to check out the Mobalytics link if you want a copy you can refer to. But now it's time to go over the gear. Alright, so as always, I'll play a mouse over of my gear as I give you a general idea of what's going on here, but basically this is a pretty cheap set, including the uniques. I've gotten some lucky corrupts on these two, but I mean, I haven't spent anything higher than a single div on any one piece, and for the longest time I was running some super crappy pieces. My mace was honestly a +3 melee skill one for the longest time while I was mapping. But yeah, let's talk about it. My mace is now a +5 melee skill one. I think this one cost a div, but again, if you're still farming up currency, just roll up with something cheaper like a +4, and I think the rolls on this are just okay, to be honest. The +5 melee is the most important part, but I would really like some elemental damage with attacks, I think, just to boost up our melee attack damage a bit more with the added lightning damage we're getting, but I'll go shopping for one soon. Oh, and obviously get some strength on the weapon, useful for the spell damage from strength branch on the passive skill tree. I also don't care about the desecration modifier here. It's okay, I guess, but I'd rather have something else. You know, enemies aren't dying from the fully broken armor bonus damage, and neither are bosses since we're just stacking that Uruk smelting debuff. High armor shield, essential as always. I think that's probably the most important thing. This was a cheapy one. I don't remember how much I spent, but it definitely wasn't even a div. Really, the armor value is the most important thing here, but additional physical damage reduction is really nice, which this one does have, and possibly some elemental damage reduced by armor. That would be a good roll, as well as, you know, whatever elemental resists you might need. In weapon set 2, my caster set, I have a wand and focus that has been treating me well lightning damage wise, as well as some much needed resistances on the focus when I weapon swap. These were on the pricier end, maybe a div or two overall, but I was actually using this staff before swapping over, which is one that I straight up crafted and got lucky on with the right you know, omens and stuff like that with the abyss crafting materials, so that was sort of free. I personally would just recommend looking up a wand and focus combo though. It's easier earlier on because if you have that focus helping you with elemental caps when you're using weapon set 2, and if you're using a staff, you don't have really any defensive stats in that offhand. You're just all damage in on the staff. And if you're looking for cheaper versions of a wand or staff or focus, just crank down the plus spell skills plus lightning skills rolls a little, and you'll get some cheaper versions for sure. Let's talk uniques. First one is Choir of the Storm, super cheap necklace, got some extra dexterity from some corruption attempts, but this is what's granting us that triggered lightning spell on all crits, and we straight up just don't have to worry about lightning resistance when we crit, which is all the time. So we're getting a lot of value out of this one on top of the big chunk of lightning resistance it can roll as well. Really like that they buffed this unique in the last update. It has become far more useful. Oh right, and I allocated harmonic generator on this. Just do that when you can afford it. It's just more magnitude to shock and crit chance against shocked enemies, and this is on the cheaper side of anointment, so that's a nice bonus too. One thing I want to mention real quick is Choir of the Storm has an innate cooldown on its triggered lightning strikes of 0.5 seconds, which I believe happens after it has triggered 5 times. Obviously that happens very fast with this build, but what's interesting is its interaction with Thunderstorm. I kid you not, as soon as you cast Thunderstorm, all 5 lightning strikes appear to happen at once and is a potent nuke. On easier bosses, I kid you not, when I'm at full rage, sometimes I just spam Thunderstorm on them and just burst crit them down with these lightning strikes because of how it hits 5 times immediately. I don't know if that's intended or not, but for now, we can enjoy it. Also, it bursts down groups on its own like that. Super strong interaction. Crown of Eyes is next, and what can I say? It's an awesome helm, as we talked about earlier. It makes all spell damage increases and decreases apply to attacks. very useful to our melee skills and is what makes our rage crank up the damage so high, alongside, you know, some of the other stuff in the passive skill tree. Got lucky with the double socket here, and I'm basically just socketing it for a little extra health regen, though I will likely replace them with max rage soul cores. I forget what they're called at the moment, but I feel like I'd get more of a bonus out of that. Just for now, I feel like I need a little bit more regen, so once I figure out how to get that elsewhere, I'll probably switch those sockets over. Chest piece is very important here if you want to run Eternal Rage. I highly recommend trying to get a decent Conjurer Mantle with the implicit spirit roll and with another spirit roll on top of that. This will likely be a pricier piece, but if you can afford to skip some of the other pricey rolls while looking for this one, like Chaos Resist and things like that, it's not too bad. I actually got this one for 25 Exalted or something like that. Not too shabby. Yeah, that's honestly the important stuff. Definitely could use some upgrades, but again, this has been conquering some pretty juiced content as is. Need melee skill on gloves here. Could find some better ES or armor ES boots, to be honest. This actually has an open prefix, which I didn't notice before I corrupted it like the noob I am. Would love another breach ring here with lightning damage or stats rolls. Strength is good to stack here also, obviously, since we're getting spell damage out of it. But I mean, that's pretty much it overall, guys. Whew. All right, so hopefully that wasn't too long. I hope you learned something, dug the build, or were at least entertained. Overall, I gotta say the build was feeling super wonky and not so great while I was experimenting, but now it feels very comfortable, and I'm really digging this one, but I gotta be honest, I'm kind of feeling the itch to go back to Warrior. I don't know, I just think I'm a Warrior player at heart, so I think I may roll Titan or Smith after this character, as it's feeling pretty much done. I'm just farming up currency and ways to scale damage, basically, so I think it's time for me to update my Fire Titan Shield Warrior build, perhaps, and I have a few other ideas for videos on my mind that will be coming out as well. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll leave you with some gameplay clips as always, and I'll see you in the next one.
Now you die!